Hare Krishna. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Hare Krishna. How are you?
I'm good. I been a rather dreary 3 days, but it's okay. I never go out anywhere anyway. I believe we're on text 31.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can pull up the share screen here. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I guess I'll start out. Text 31. Ye me matramidam nityam anustitani manava. Shravanto nasuyanto muchyante tepi karmabi. Synonyms. Yea, those who may my matam injunctions, idam these, nityam as an eternal function, anutistanti, execute regularly, manava, human beings, vradavanta, with faith and devotion, anusuyanta, without envy, muchyante, become free, te, all of them, api, even, karma be, from the bondage of the law of fruitive actions. Translation: those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. Let's take turns reading each verse, unless it's a long one. Purport. And the injunction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom and therefore is eternally true without exception. As the Vedas are eternal, so this truth of Krishna consciousness is also eternal. One should have firm faith in this injunction without envying the Lord. There are many philosophers who write comments on Bhagavad-gītā but have no faith in Krishna. They will never be liberated from the bondage of fruitive action. But an ordinary man with firm faith in the eternal injunctions of the Lord, even though unable to execute such orders, becomes liberated from the bondage of the law of karma. From the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. Go ahead.
So, in the purport here, so this is, I guess, saying that that really just having faith in Krishna is enough.
Yeah. I mean, even if you can't, it says if you can't, even if you can't and fully execute the injunctions of the Lord, because you're not envious, because you're innocent, you're not offensive, and if you work sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, etc., then gradually Krishna will relevate you to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness, because see, that faith means implicit belief in something sublime. So if you have faith in Krishna and you make that the center of your activity, in other words, just what Krishna, you have faith that Krishna will guide you through every activity that you do throughout the day, then even if you don't execute all those things that Krishna wants you to do perfectly, because Krishna is very deep and you may not completely understand what he wants you to do at any given moment, even though he's always within our hearts and he's telling us what to do, because we're somewhat connected with that glimmer of faith. Therefore, we'll eventually become elevated to the platform where we understand actually exactly what Krishna wants us to do, and we'll execute it without even being asked. And that'll be the first class platform. I was just reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Antya Lila, the glories of Haridas Thakur, and he was saying that just a glimmer of the holy name of Krishna is sufficient to actually bring one to the liberation of to actually eradicate all the sinful activities, more than you can even imagine. And even if the words of the Hare Krishna mantra are separated by spaces, even if it's not uttered intentionally, because you're not envious, because you're not doing it for your own sense gratification, those names, and if it enters into the ears, and if it makes you remember in any way, the holy name will act, because it's just like fire. A child, when he touches fire, he's not excused. If he touches a fire, he'll get burned. As an old man, he'll get burned as well. So the fire acts no matter what person is doing it. So the proof of that is the pastime of Ajamil in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where he had been raised a Brahmana, and he was, nice upbringing, but then he got engaged. He got involved in a prostitute, and he did all kinds of abominable things, and involved himself in, stealing and, getting money for the prostitute to raise their children and everything. And he spent his whole life in sinful activities. But at the end of his life, one of his children, his youngest child's name, he was old, he was like 80, 90 years old. And he was dying on his deathbed, and he called out for his young son named Narayan. In India, they named their children spiritual names. And so he called out for him. He wasn't calling out for Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but because he was calling out even for his son unintentionally. The Yamadutas were there. They're going to drag him to hell. But the Vishnu Dutas say, "What are you doing? This person is innocent." And so they freed him from his bondage, and he went back to Godhead because of that, because even inattentively chanting. So the holy name is powerful, even if you have a little bit of faith. It says that if you have just a little advancement on this path, can protect you from the most dangerous type of fear. You know what the most dangerous type of fear is?
And we talked about that before, the coming back again, not getting another human form.
Yeah.
To serve Krishna.
Yeah. So it's like, it's really important to at least try to always remember Krishna and chant his name all the time, because that way we're protected. Then if we practice that our whole lives, then we'll be, then even if we are in a situation where we're not exactly conscious, Krishna will rescue us from our whatever situation we're in. And he guarantees, I will protect you from all, my devotee will never perish. Don't worry. You should have firm faith in that. So does that answer your question a little bit?
Well, yeah, it was more of an observation. This is such a, feel so grateful to Prabhupada for these purports, because I wouldn't have gotten that, out of just the verse itself. But also then just, it's such a hope-filled purport in that, being so flawed and, needing so much grace to achieve this, but just having that little, all it takes is this little bit of, faith. And even if you can't actually properly discharge all the things, you'll still be okay. It's just,
I think Maitreya just sent me a message. Hold me, let me see. Hold on. Too much to do, too little time. That was Thoreau's complaint when he had a farm. He was looking at all the other farmers, and he was saying, man, it seems like these guys are just working all the time. And it's like Sisyphus. You ever heard that Greek?
Oh, yeah.
Rolling the big boulder up the hill, and then it just rolls back down on top of you. They have so many things, especially if you have family and you have all kinds of things to do. And so Thoreau just decided, oh, hell with it. I'm just going to try to become self-sufficient. So he got a little plot of land on Emerson's property, planted some soybeans, and he tried to be self-sufficient in that little pond near Walden. Walden Pond, That's why he wrote that book, Walden, Civil Disobedience. The reason it says civil disobedience is because he didn't pay any taxes. And so he got arrested and thrown in jail. And Emerson went to visit him in jail. And he said, "What are you doing in jail?" He said, "Well, all the cool people are in jail." He said in so many words, I don't know exactly what he said, but, he said, like I'm, but anyway, that was a story of Thoreau trying to be simple. Actually our philosophy is like that too. Prabhupada promoted simple living and high thinking. If you do that in our farm communities, then it frees you from so much work. Work is just a scam, basically. I mean, Prabhupada said that. He said, work is a scam. There's so many things you can actually do. If you just work for the bare minimum of your necessities, you don't need so much stuff. It's only because we have all these material desires that we need iPhones and flat screen TVs and cars and, all these things. I didn't even know that you were married. You're married, right?
Yeah.
And you have a daughter?
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that devotees don't talk about their families too much. I mean, you said that you were picking up your daughter that one day. What's your daughter's name?
Vera.
Ira?
Vera.
How do you spell that?
V. Vera.
Vera. Oh, okay. That's a nice name. But how old is she?
14.
14. Okay. Yeah, I never had any kids. I was too old by that point, when I got married, 17 years ago, even though I was too old back then, I just didn't want to like be at the baseball game with the little league and have my son out there and I'd be like with my walker and my, colostomy bag, I didn't want to be in that situation, have an old man like that. But I'm kind of glad I did because it frees me up from so many responsibilities. But, even in household life, we can execute Krishna consciousness very nicely. So why don't you read the next verse if you're done commenting?
Sure. Text 32. Yeta vetad abhyasuyanto nanutishtanti me matam sarvajana vimudamstan pidinashtan echetasaha. Synonyms. Yea, those too, however, etat this abhyasuyanta, out of envy, do not. Anutishtanti, regularly perform. My, matam, injunction. Sarvajnana, in all sorts of knowledge. Vimudan, perfectly befooled. Tan, they are. Vidi, know it well. Nashtan, all ruined. Achetasa, without Krishna consciousness. Translation. But those who, out of envy, disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled and ruined in their endeavors for perfection.
Go ahead and read the purport.
Purport. The flaw of not being Krishna conscious is clearly stated herein. As there is punishment for disobedience to the order of the Supreme Executive Head, so there is certainly punishment for disobedience to the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A disobedient person, however great he may be, is ignorant of his own self and of the Supreme Brahman, Paramatma, and the personality of Godhead, due to a vacant heart. Therefore, there is no hope of perfection of life for him.
Yeah, the envy part, abhyasuyanta, out of envy. If you don't, you're envious of Krishna, therefore you're envious of actually your own soul, and you're envious of everybody else too. If you're envious of Krishna, who is the soul of our souls. So a person who's envious, most people in this material world are envious of each other, and they like the symptom of being envious, like to animals even, is to kill them and to eat them, because you don't care about anybody but yourself, because you're ignorant of your real self and you're ignorant of the Supreme Brahman and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because you don't have a heart. So how can you actually engage in Krishna consciousness if you're envious of other living entities? That's a really really important point, I think, in this particular verse, because envy is one of the main obstacles to Krishna consciousness. Even if you have a little bit of envy, you think, "No, I'm better than this person, or I'm more advanced, this person really doesn't know what he's talking about, he's not as, even a little bit of pride or envy, it can actually contaminate you till you get to the point where you actually offend people, and that offends Krishna too, because everybody's part and parcel of Krishna. So Krishna is in everyone's heart, and we can't envy any living entity. We should treat every living entity as a temple of Krishna. So Krishna is in everyone's heart. When we interact with people, we simply have to realize that I have to pay all respect to this person, and I am the lowest of men, and this person actually is more advanced than I am. It's actually an advanced devotee feels that way, even though even the most advanced devotees feel that everyone else is better than I am. Yudhishthira Maharaj, he was told to go and find someone that was lower than he was in the kingdom, and so he went out and searched. He couldn't find anybody. And then Duryodhana, he was told to go out and find somebody that was greater than he was, and he couldn't find anybody that was greater than he was. So, it's just the opposite. It's like the world is filled with egomaniacs who are totally envious of everybody else. There's always competition and struggle and hatred and fear, and if he's my enemy, I'll kill him. There's no one more perfect and powerful than I am. It's a demonic mentality, and envy is one of the root causes of that. Just an egocentric type of attitude in the living entity. I guess we'll just go on here. Sadisham chestate svasya prakriti ganavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nagarha kim karishyati. Synonyms. Sadisham, accordingly, chestate tries svasya by his own prakriti, modes of nature, gyanavan, learned, api, although prakritim, nature, yanti, undergo, bhutani, all living entities, nigraha, repression, kim, what? Karisyati, can do. Translation: even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows his nature he has acquired from the three modes. What can repression accomplish? Purport: unless one is situated on the transcendental platform of Krishna consciousness, he cannot get free from the influence of the modes of material nature, as it is confirmed by the Lord in the 7th chapter, 7:14. Therefore, even for the most highly educated person on the mundane plane, it's impossible to get out of the entanglement of Maya simply by theoretical knowledge or by separating the soul from the body. There are many so-called spiritualists who outwardly pose as advanced in the science, but inwardly or privately are completely under the particular modes of nature which they are unable to surpass. Academically, one may be very learned. Because of his long association with material nature, he's in bondage. Krishna consciousness helps one get out of the material entanglement, even though one may be engaged in his prescribed duties in terms of material existence. Therefore, without being fully Krishna conscious, one should not give up his occupational duties. No one should suddenly give up his prescribed duties and become a so-called yogi or transcendentalist artificially. It is better to be situated in one's position and try to attain Krishna consciousness under superior training. Thus, one may be free from the clutches of Krishna's Maya. Let me just show you one thing I just saw today on a website or on a Facebook group page. Hold on a second. It's called Progressive Vaishnavism. Progressive Vaishnavism. Anyway, I don't think I can find it right away, but let me just go back to this. But basically what was saying is, it was kind of like based on the Gita. It was saying, you can't just like artificially stop all your engagements in the material world and just take sannyas. That will lead to repression. Repression, it's like, like, I think it's a Freudian term, sexual repression, but you can't just automatically say, okay, I'm no longer going to engage in this material world. I'm going to be completely renounced. But unless you are fully Krishna conscious, you can't just artificially do that. It's a mode of, it leads to a repressive attitude, which will ultimately create havoc in your devotional life. You have to, you have to gradually come out of the entanglement of Maya by a step-by-step process. As long as you're engaged in the material world, you have to do your duty in regards to the Vedic injunctions and just surrender step by step. And then when we get to the completely transcendental platform, then we'll be totally free to do whatever Krishna wants us to do.
It seems like with like what we were talking about on Monday with like dovetailing one's work. And then also, I guess a couple of weeks ago, that whole idea of, you can't just eliminate, negative material behaviors. They actually need to be replaced with Krishna conscious behaviors because those desires are still there.
Yeah.
And if you just try to shut them off, you're not going to have those fulfilled. But when you act in Krishna consciousness, those desires are automatically fulfilled along with so much more.
Yeah, and not only that, the sinful reaction, there's different seeds of sin. First you get the sinful activity itself, that's a seed. And then it fructifies, you suffer the results of that sinful activity after a while. And just by arranging material nature, what they call prayaschita, which means atoning for your sins, like some kind of like you punish yourself or somebody else punishes you for a sin, that doesn't work because you have to actually be purified from the consciousness. Like a thief, if he's addicted to stealing, he's going to steal. It doesn't matter. He might be told that you're going to get arrested, but sometimes he'll listen to that. And maybe sometimes people will not steal anymore if he understands what his suffering will be afterwards. But then people who are addicted to it, they'll just go ahead and steal anyway and get caught and punished. So and then they'll do it again even after they're punished. So it's like Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam, it's like an elephant that goes to take a bath on the banks of the river. And after it comes out of the water, it takes all the sand and throws it all over itself. And so he's dirty again. So that kind of prayaschita is condemned. And Shukadev Goswami asked Maharaj Parikshit about that. And he explained that actually you're correct. You have to be purified in the heart. Otherwise, these desires are like weeds that'll come up again and they'll strangle your devotional creeper. And you won't be able to prosecute Krishna consciousness because all this stuff is in the way. It's like throwing dirt, like the Christians say, they say, Christians aren't perfect. They're just forgiven. I've seen a bumper sticker that says that, but you can't do that. That's like the seventh offense against the holy name. You can't go on chanting Hare Krishna and expecting again and again that you'll be atoned from all your sinful activities and then go on with your sinful activities and then chant Hare Krishna again. Just like, on Sunday, or on Saturday night, they'll confess their sins and then the next day they'll go out and do whatever they want. It doesn't work that way. That Prabhupada said that the Christians are doing that. They're crucifying Christ afresh because Christ died for your sin. So if you keep on sinning in his name and expecting him to rectify you from all your sinful activities again and again, you're just nailing him up on the cross again and again. So if you have any love for your guru or your spiritual teacher or Krishna himself, you won't do that to your spiritual master. The spiritual master has to suffer. If his disciple executes if he does some sinful activity, Prabhupada said, the reason why he got sick, when I came in 1977, Prabhupada was sick and all the devotees were blaming themselves because Prabhupada was saying that, sometimes my disciples are committing sinful activities and therefore the spiritual master has to suffer. So, the devotees were pretty, feeling guilty about that. And it's true. That's why it's not recommended that a spiritual teacher take too many disciples, because he has to burn off all that karma from all the sinful activities from all his disciples. So it's a precarious situation if you're not actually pure and able to do that. But if you're a pure devotee like Prabhupada, The pure devotee can actually purify even the holy places. They'll go to a holy place. The people will come there and they'll bathe in the river, the Ganges or whatever, in Prayag or Allahabad, and they'll leave all their sinful activities there. But Lord Chaitanya or somebody else will go there and completely purify and burn up all the sinful activities of that place. So those kind of people are walking holy places. They're tirthas. They're in and of themselves, and they purify everything and everyone that they come in contact with. So that's why we need the association of devotees. You want to read the next verse?
Okay, text 34. Indriyasyendriyasyarte ragdvesha vyavastita tayornavasyam agachet tauhe asya paripanthanam. Synonyms. Indriyasya, of the senses. Indriyasya arte, in the sense objects. Raga, attachment. Dvesha, also detachment. Vyavastita, put under regulations. Tayo, of them, na, never. Vasham, control. Agachchet, one should come. Tau, those, he, certainly. Asya, his. Paripantana, stumbling blocks. Translation. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization.
Go ahead and read the whole thing.
Purport. Those who are in Krishna consciousness are naturally reluctant to engage in material sense gratification. But those who are not in such consciousness should follow the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures. Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material engagement. The one who follows the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures does not become entangled by the sense objects. For example, sex enjoyment is a necessity for the conditioned soul, and sex enjoyment is allowed under the license of marriage ties. According to scriptural injunctions, one is forbidden to engage in sex relations with any woman other than one's wife. All other women are considered to be one's mother. But in spite of such injunctions, a man is still inclined to have sex relationships with other women. These propensities are to be curbed. Otherwise, there will be stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. As long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under rules and regulations. And yet, we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow those rules and regulations unattached to them, because practice of sense gratification under regulations may also lead one to go astray, as much as there is always a chance of an accident, even on the royal roads. Although they may be very carefully maintained, no one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on the safest road. The sense enjoyment spirit has been current a very, very long time, owing to material association. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is every chance of falling down. Therefore, any attachment for regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided by all means. But attachment to Krishna consciousness, or acting always in the loving service of Krishna, detaches one from all kinds of sensory activities. Therefore, no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. The whole purpose of detachment from all kinds of sense attachment is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of someone who is attached to the rules and regulations. You may say, okay, well, I'm married and I'm going to be, I have my wife and I'm going to engage in as much sex as I can, maybe even, strictly, according to, the scriptures, which says only for procreation. But the thing is, you can't be attached to that method. It's actually meant to give it up eventually, because anything that's not if any kind of separate enjoying mentality other than Krishna, if you're a grahasta and you engage in sex life in order to have a Krishna conscious child, then it's perfectly okay. It's not recommended, but you can do it. And even Bhaktisiddhanta Srila Prabhupada's guru said, if I could have sex and produce one Krishna conscious child, I would do that 100 times. But it's interesting to note that he didn't have any children, and he was a Naistika brahmachari, completely celibate his whole entire life. I mean, he was so strict, he was following the rules and regulations just even from a child. One time he ate a mango and it wasn't offered. And his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, chastised him for it. And he was only like 5 or 7 years old. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he wasn't, well, I forget his name at that time, but he never again ate a mango in his entire life. That's what kind of person he was. And so if you can do that, that shows a character that you're willing to follow the rules and act according to the injunctions of the scripture for Krishna's pleasure. And you're very much aware of that and won't deviate it from even an inch. So if you actually want to please Krishna, you'll do what Krishna wants you to do. That's service. That's devotional service to Krishna. That's the goal, but you have to actually think of what does Krishna want me to do? When we're chanting holy name of Krishna, we have to think, like my spiritual master always taught me that it's kind of like a prayer, like, dear Lord Krishna, have mercy on me, engage me in your service. These mantras are just a plea to help us engage in his service. So if we really want to serve him, there's no better person to serve. Once you understand how great Krishna is, you want to serve that person, and because then it'll give you all kinds of it'll make him happy, and when he's happy, then there's nothing better to be attained. So that's the goal, but we have to practice it and just ask for service. We have to beg Lord Chaitanya for the holy name, and then if we do that our whole life, then he will eventually give it to us, despite our fallen platform. Text 35. Shreyan svadharmo viguna paradharmat svanashtitat. Swadharme nidanam shreya paradharmo bhayavaha. Synonyms: Shreyan, far better. Swadharma, one's prescribed duties. Viguna, even faulty. Paradharma, than duties mentioned for others. Su anustitat, perfectly done. Swadharme, in one's prescribed duty. Nidanam, destruction. Shreya, better. Paradharma, dharma, duties prescribed for others. By avaha, dangerous. Translation. Were you supposed to read this verse? I think you were.
I did the last one.
Oh, okay. It's far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duty perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty. For to follow another's path is dangerous. Purport: that one should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness rather than those prescribed for others. Materially, prescribed duties are duties enjoined according to one's psychophysical condition, under the spell of the modes of material nature. Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna, but whether material or spiritual, one should stick to his prescribed duties even up to death, rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow those prescribed rules for his particular situation, should not imitate others. For example, a Brahmana who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmana who follows the principles of nonviolence. Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahmana, the Brahmana may act as a Kshatriya. In the transcendental stage, the distinctions of the material world do not apply. For example, Vishvamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on he acted as a Brahmana. whereas Parashuram was a Brahmana, but later on he acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendently situated, they could do so, but as long as one's on the material platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of material nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness. Yeah, it's like, I can't remember the pastime, but I think it involved Parshuram, and he was sitting in meditation. He was serving a teacher. I'm not sure which personality it was, but there was a bug that was boring into his skin, and he was able to tolerate that. And the other person found out that that was happening. And he said, "You're not a Brahmana, you're a Kshatriya," because no one could tolerate that pain. And so, but still, if you're on the transcendental platform, you can act in any way, because, like Lord Chaitanya said, I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya or Sudra or Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. I'm not any of these things. I am Gopi Bhartu Pradakamale or Dasa Das Anudas. I'm a servant of the servant of the servant of the gopis who are serving Krishna. So that is the position of a devotee. If you try to serve Krishna directly, Krishna says, "You're not my devotee." One who claims to be my devotee is not my devotee, but one who's a servant of my devotee, he's my devotee. Go ahead and read the second one, 36.
Arjuna uvacha, atha kena prayukto yam papam charati purusha anichchan api varshnaya baladivi niyojita. Synonyms. Arjuna uvacha, Arjuna said, atha then, kena by what, prayukta impelled, ayam one, papam sins, charati does, purusha a man, anichan without desiring, api although, varshnaya O descendant of Vrishni, balat by force, iva as if, niyojita engaged. Translation. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Purport.
Okay.
The living entity, as part and parcel of the Supreme, is originally spiritual, pure, and free from all material contamination. Therefore, by nature, he is not subject to the sins of the material world. But when he is in contact with the material nature, he acts in many sinful ways without hesitation, and sometimes even against his will. As such, Arjuna's question to Krishna is very sanguine as to the perverted nature of the living entities. Although the living entity sometimes does not want to act in sin, he is still forced to act. Sinful actions are not, however, impelled by the supersoul within, but are due to another cause, as the Lord explains in the next verse.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. We're going to have to stop here pretty soon here because it's almost 6:40, but Deva Amrita Swami, I used to be a personal servant of Deva Amrita. You know Deva Amrita Swami?
I know who he is, yeah.
He's a guru. He was in New Vrindavan for a long time. He was actually temple president for some time. He was in charge of the Sankirtan devotees for a long time, and I would drive him around to all the different Sankirtan spots. But I was his driver and also served him. He kind of took me under his wing because I transcribed some of his lectures because I really liked his lectures, and I actually put them into a book and published. I didn't publish the book, but I printed it up in Vermont from a devotee who had left New Vrindavan and had his own printer up there. And so he kind of took me under his wing, but he said, I remember what he said. He said, lust, what he's talking about is the next couple verses is about lust. What is it that impels one to commit sinful acts, even if unwillingly, as if engaged by force? And Krishna says in the next verse, it's lust. And what is lust? Deva Amrita Swami said, lust is just love of God gone bad. Just like milk, if it goes bad, it turns into sour milk or whatever. So lust is the pure impulses of the spirit soul are in love. But when we're affected by the material modes we think we're the bodies, then we think that instead of, acting on this initial pure platform of love of God, then we think that we're the bodies, and therefore we want to engage in activities that'll satisfy our sensual demands. And so that's lust. So it's just like a kind of a rotten thing, living in the material world. It's a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Do you have any comments on anything before we stop here?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Okay, next time we'll start on text 37.
Good.
See, it says right here, Sri Bhagavan Kama, lust. It's the all-devouring greatest enemy of the world. Yeah, you can't get anything. Yeah, I just heard that, just see how lust actually brings down the greatest people in this material world. Brought down Clinton and all these, just whatever her name is, Ghislaine Maxwell, the facilitator of that pervert, what's his name, Epstein. She just got convicted for sexual trafficking. So, you can't hang out with people like that. They're, Lord Chaitanya warns against actually, engaging in such lusty activities, or even men or women that are attracted to such lusty activities, because it really is the most sinful enemy of the world, and it's the enemy of the soul. So even if you hang out with people that are like that, which a lot of people did, Clinton hung out with Epstein, Trump hung out with Epstein, Prince Andrew, he's probably in a lot of trouble because, he's not going to be freed from expedition. The Queen's probably not too happy about that. But the greatest emperors, it says, like in the Krishna said, isn't it amazing my material energy with the slight movement of the eyebrows of a woman can cause the greatest kings to fall down at my feet, at the feet of a woman, so it's like, it's pretty powerful if you think about it. And so that's why it's so important not to associate with those kind of people that are engaged in lusty activities. That's why Lord Chaitanya had to punish his own devotee, Thakur, or not Thakur Haridas, but Junior Haridas. He actually went to get some rice from some woman to prepare for prasadam, and because he talked to her intimately, Lord Chaitanya could figure that out, and he banished him. He didn't even allow him to come back for a whole year. And devotees were pleading with Lord Chaitanya to let him back because it was just a minor offense. But Lord Chaitanya wanted to set a precedent, I don't want my sannyasis or people in a renounced order to be involved in women at all. And so he banished him, and, he went and killed himself in the Triveni. He jumped in the confluence of the Yamuna and the Ganges and committed suicide. And they told Lord Chaitanya, like a little after that, he said, where's Junior Haridas? And he said, well, we don't know, and then finally it was revealed that he had actually committed suicide, and Lord Chaitanya smiled. He said, yes, this is proper. I mean, he was very strict, and he wanted to set that precedent, because otherwise you'll have just like a bunch of renounced people in the name of Lord Chaitanya doing all kinds of these activities, and it will bring all kinds of infamy to the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So therefore we can't, we have to be responsible as representatives of Lord Chaitanya in order to be accepted by him. After that incident, the devotees were so afraid of even speaking with a woman that they wouldn't even dream. They didn't even literally dream of speaking to women after that. They were so afraid. So it was actually a perfect action by Lord Chaitanya himself. He says hard as a thunderbolt, but he can be soft as a rose at the same time. And that's just the nature of Lord Chaitanya's, unlimited depth of purpose. We might not be able to understand it, but and it appears pretty harsh, but it's actually for a great purpose. And he used his own devotee as an example for that. Anyway, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining again.
Okay. Great. Hare Krishna.
Talk to you later.